In a mansion where luxury hides abuse, a cleaning lady breaks the silence to protect a mistreated elderly woman. As she's hunted and defamed, she uncovers a conspiracy involving power, inheritance, and manipulation. But no one expected that the most invisible person in the house would be the one to bring the whole system down. The morning sun illuminated the imposing mansion in the Oakwood Estates gated community in Brentwood, Greater Los Angeles. Golden rays outlined the neoclassical architecture, reflecting off the enormous windows and the Italian marble swimming pool. It was a daily spectacle that Josephine Silva, 42, contemplated without admiration as she passed through the service gates in her impeccably ironed uniform. After 5 years as a cleaner at the Albrights' mansion, she already knew every inch of that place and the silent secrets that dwelled within its ornate walls. The mansion belonged to Mark Albright, a real estate mogul whose name ranked among the wealthiest in the country. His construction empire spanned the entire national territory, the result of decades of work initiated by his father, Mr. Augustus Albright, who had passed away a few years prior. Josephine adjusted her badge and greeted Silas, the security guard at the entrance, who responded with a discreet nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Carmen. Did you sleep well?" Josephine asked, entering the kitchen to find the housekeeper organizing the day's routine. "As always, Josephine. Today Mrs. Felicity asked you to start with Mrs. Cecilia's room. It seems she had another episode last night," Carmen said without lifting her eyes from the clipboard. Josephine nodded, hiding her concern. Mrs. Cecilia, Mark's mother, had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago. Since then, her condition had been rapidly deteriorating, especially after the arrival of Felicity, Mark's new wife, who had taken control of the house with an iron fist and a porcelain smile. The path to the elderly woman's room was a tour through excessive luxury. Persian rugs, paintings by renowned artists, rare sculptures. Everything contrasted with Josephine's simplicity, who had grown up in the outskirts of Los Angeles and had earned her place there after years of working in family homes. Her discretion and efficiency were her calling card. However, there was something more about her that few noticed, a keen sense of justice that stirred whenever she witnessed abuse. Upon opening the bedroom door, she found Mrs. Cecilia sitting on the edge of the bed, her gaze lost and her white hair disheveled. She wore a blue silk nightgown, and her trembling hands rested in her lap. The room, despite its luxury, had an air of abandonment. Josephine felt a pang in her chest. "Good morning, Mrs. Cecilia. It's me, Josephine. I've come to tidy your room," she announced in a serene voice, approaching slowly. The elderly woman did not respond, but her eyes, previously vacant, seemed to focus for an instant on the familiar figure. Josephine smiled and began her cleaning routine, speaking naturally about the weather, the flowers in the garden, small everyday occurrences. She knew that even when Mrs. Cecilia didn't respond, her voice created an atmosphere of security. "It's a beautiful day outside. Afterwards we could sit in the garden for a bit, what do you think?" Josephine suggested, changing the sheets. That's when the door burst open, and Felicity Albright entered wearing a designer tracksuit and her platinum blonde hair tied in an impeccable ponytail. At 34, she was 2 decades younger than her husband and always displayed a body sculpted by surgeries and daily exercise. "Haven't you finished here yet, Josephine?" "It's almost 9 o'clock, she exclaimed, completely ignoring her mother-in-law's presence. "I'm finishing, Mrs. Felicity, just need to tidy the bathroom," Josephine replied, maintaining her calm. "Well, be quick. And why is the window open? She might catch a cold, and then I'll be left to deal with that problem," she said, abruptly closing the window. Mrs. Cecilia flinched at the noise, and her eyes filled with tears. Josephine noticed the subtle movement, but continued her work in silence. She had already learned that any direct intervention would result in more problems for the elderly woman. "Besides," Felicity continued, approaching her mother-in-law with irritation, "look at this nightgown. It's all wrinkled. She can't stay like this for when the doctor comes. What will they think of our house?" Without any delicacy, Felicity grabbed Mrs. Cecilia's arm, pulling her. "Let's change this right now." The elderly woman moaned in pain, trying to resist. That's when Josephine could no longer contain herself. "Mrs. Felicity, if you'll permit, I can help Mrs. Cecilia change." "You must have many commitments today," she intervened, placing herself between the two. Felicity stared at her with surprise and indignation. She was not used to being contradicted by staff. "Since when do you decide what to do in this house, Josephine?" she asked with a cold smile. "Don't forget your place." "I'm just offering to help, madam," Josephine replied, maintaining a respectful but firm tone. "Mrs. Cecilia seems a little sensitive today." Felicity released her mother-in-law's arm and stared at Josephine for a few seconds. Her perfect face showed no emotion, but her eyes conveyed a clear message that insubordination would not be forgotten. "Do as you wish. But don't take long. The nurse arrives at noon and this room needs to be impeccable," she declared, leaving the room with firm steps. When the door closed, Josephine took a deep breath and turned her attention to Mrs. Cecilia, who was trembling slightly. With gentle movements, she helped her sit in the armchair near the window. "It's all right. Mrs. Cecilia, let's choose a beautiful outfit for you," she said, opening the wardrobe filled with fine clothes that were rarely worn. While helping the elderly woman dress, Josephine noticed purple marks on her thin arms. Her heart pounded. It wasn't the first time she had noticed signs of mistreatment, but these were recent. She took a deep breath, trying to control her indignation. "I will take care of you," she whispered, more to herself than to Mrs. Cecilia. "You can trust me." The elderly woman, as if understanding, lightly squeezed Josephine's hand. It was an almost imperceptible gesture, but loaded with meaning. At that moment, something changed in the cleaner's heart. A silent decision was made. She could no longer pretend not to see what was happening in that perfect house, where money bought everything but dignity for those who could no longer defend themselves. Outside, in the corridor, Felicity spoke on the phone in a low voice. "Yes, everything is under control. The doctor will come today to review the medication. No, Mark doesn't suspect anything. Of course, I'm in a hurry, but we need to be cautious. Soon everything will be ours, just be patient." She hung up the phone and headed to her office. Unaware that Josephine, upon leaving the room to fetch water for Mrs. Cecilia, had overheard part of the conversation, an invisible thread of tension now stretched between the two women, connecting worlds that should never cross. In one of those worlds, Josephine perfectly understood what was at stake, and knew she had crossed a line from which she could not retreat. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The following weeks brought subtle changes to the routine of the Albright mansion. Josephine reorganized her schedule to spend more time near Mrs. Cecilia, always vigilant. Her hands, calloused by years of work, now performed additional tasks with the same efficiency, styling the elderly woman's white hair into an elegant bun, reading excerpts from old novels she found in the mansion's library, or simply holding her trembling hands in moments of anguish. "Josephine, the gardener is complaining that you didn't clean the pool deck today," Carmen, the housekeeper, commented one Wednesday afternoon. Mrs. Felicity noticed and was not at all pleased. "I apologize, Mrs. Carmen." Mrs. Cecilia was agitated after lunch. "I thought it best to stay with her for a while," Josephine replied, organizing cleaning products. Carmen adjusted her glasses on her thin face and sighed. At 58, she knew well the dynamics of luxury homes and their power games. "Look, Josephine, I understand your affection for Mrs. Cecilia, but you need to be careful. You're treading on dangerous ground. Mrs. Felicity has already commented twice about your closeness to her mother-in-law." Josephine merely nodded, understanding the warning between the lines. Carmen was a practical woman who survived in that environment by always remaining neutral. She had learned this in almost 30 years of service in elite homes. That night, Mark Albright arrived home early from the office. Tall, with graying hair at his temples and a well-preserved physique for his 54 years, he carried himself like a man who commanded the world around him. Josephine observed him discreetly as she cleaned the main staircase railing. He seemed tired, carrying an Italian leather briefcase and a constantly ringing cell phone. "Good evening, sir," she greeted, lowering her eyes as protocol dictated. "Good evening," he replied, distracted as he checked messages. "Your mother had a good day today." "She managed to eat all her soup at lunch," Josephine commented, surprising herself with her boldness. Mark stopped and looked at her with renewed interest. "Really?" "The doctor said she's been refusing food for days. Sometimes it's just a matter of patience, sir." She likes it when we talk about the garden while she eats. For an instant, something akin to gratitude passed through Mark's eyes. A rare and fleeting moment that disappeared when Felicity appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a low-cut red dress. "Darling, I didn't know you'd be home early. I'm almost ready for the charity dinner," she said, descending the steps with calculated elegance. "Actually, I thought about staying home today." "I'm exhausted," he replied, putting away his cell phone. Felicity couldn't hide her displeasure. "But it's the Arts Foundation event. Everyone will be there, including the governor. I've already confirmed our presence. You can go if you want. I intend to see my mother and rest." Felicity's smile wavered for a second. "See your mother? Darling, she probably won't even recognize you. Besides, she's already taken her sleeping pills." Josephine, who continued her work pretending not to listen, felt a chill. Mrs. Cecilia usually didn't take sleeping pills before 9. "Who authorized medication outside of schedule?" Mark asked, frowning. "Dr. Richard adjusted the regimen this afternoon. He said it would help with her nighttime episodes," Felicity quickly replied. "You can check the medical record he left." The tension between the couple was palpable. Josephine finished cleaning and quietly withdrew, but not before noticing the cold glare Felicity shot her. A look that clearly said, "You don't belong in this conversation." Later, in the service area where the staff kept their belongings, Josephine found Silas having coffee. "Tough night?" he asked, offering her a cup. "As always," she replied, accepting the coffee. "Silas, how long have you worked here again?" "Oh, almost 15 years. I came with Mr. Augustus, God rest his soul. It was a different time. The house had a soul. And Mrs. Cecilia, what was she like before her illness?" The middle-aged security guard smiled nostalgically. A firm but fair lady, she managed everything, knew every employee by name, took an interest in each one's family. She was the one who helped me when my son needed an expensive surgery. She arranged a doctor, paid for everything, and never let me feel humiliated by it. Josephine absorbed that information, imagining the strong woman who now languished in a luxurious room, at the mercy of an unscrupulous daughter-in-law. "And this Dr. Richard? Did he always take care of her?" "No," Silas lowered his voice. "He arrived with Mrs. Felicity. The old doctor, Dr. Paul, was dismissed shortly after the wedding. He had been a family friend for decades." Before they could continue their conversation, Carmen appeared at the door. "Josephine, the boss is calling you to the office." Josephine felt her stomach sink. In 5 years, she had never been called to Mark's office. She straightened her uniform and followed Carmen through the mansion's corridors. In the spacious office paneled with noble wood, Mark sat behind an imposing desk. There was no sign of Felicity. "You called for me, sir?" "Yes, Josephine. Please sit." He indicated the chair in front. "I want to talk about my mother." Josephine sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped in her lap. "What exactly have you been doing when you're with her?" "I've noticed a difference in her behavior lately." The direct question caught her off guard. "Just what anyone would do, sir. I talk to her even when she doesn't respond. I show her old photos I found in her room. Sometimes I sing songs that seem to calm her." "Songs?" Mark seemed genuinely surprised. "Yes, old carnival marches. Once she smiled when I sang Wonderful City, Cidade Maravillosa. I thought maybe it held some special memory for her." Mark leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "She lived in Miami before marrying my father. She rarely spoke about it." A comfortable silence settled between them. For the first time, Josephine saw vulnerability in the eyes of that powerful man. "You know, Josephine, I admit, I haven't been the son I should have been. Business always consumed my time, and after my mother got sick, I confess it's hard to see someone who was always so strong in this situation." "I understand, sir. But even if she doesn't recognize people or places, Mrs. Cecilia is still here. She responds to affection, to patience. Doctors say that's important." Mark nodded slowly. "I'd like you to dedicate more time to her care. I can hire someone else for your current duties." "It would be an honor, sir." "Excellent. I'll speak with Carmen to adjust your routine starting tomorrow. And Josephine," he hesitated, "thank you for doing what I should have done." As she left the office, Josephine found Felicity in the corridor, her eyes sparkling with rage. "What did you tell him?" she asked without preamble. "I merely answered questions about Mrs. Cecilia, madam." "Listen closely, you busybody. Don't think I haven't noticed your little game. Taking care of the old woman to win the boss's sympathy. Very clever. But you're dealing with someone much smarter. Josephine kept her face neutral despite her racing heart. I don't know what you're talking about, madam. I just do my job. Your job is to clean, not to give opinions on medications or treatments. The next time you meddle where you're not called, you'll regret it. Felicity walked away, her expensive perfume leaving a trail in the air. Josephine took a deep breath, knowing she had just made a powerful enemy. But thinking of Mrs. Cecilia, alone and vulnerable in that luxurious room, she knew she wouldn't back down. That night, before leaving, she stopped by the elderly woman's room. She was sleeping restlessly, murmuring incomprehensible words. Josephine adjusted the blanket and, on impulse, picked up the picture frame on the nightstand. It was an old photo, Cecilia young, embracing a man who must have been Augustus Albright, both smiling on a beach. I'll take care of her, I promise, she whispered to the image. As she put the picture frame back, she noticed a box of medicine in the half-open drawer. She frowned as she read the label. She didn't recognize that name. She quickly took a photo with her simple cell phone before closing the drawer. At the bus stop, while waiting for her ride to the Silver Lake neighborhood, where she lived in a modest apartment, Josephine sent the photo to her friend Denise, a nurse at General Hospital. Do you know this medication? Is it for Alzheimer's? The answer came minutes later. It's not for Alzheimer's. It's a strong sedative normally used in severe psychiatric treatments. Who is taking this? Josephine's new role as Mrs. Cecilia's official caregiver brought immediate changes to the Albright mansion. The old single bed in the small service area room, where she sometimes rested between shifts, was replaced by a small room near the elderly woman's with a private bathroom, an ascent that did not go unnoticed by the other staff. You got lucky, huh, Josephine? Commented Rita, the cook, as they prepared breakfast. From cleaner to lady's companion in the blink of an eye. It's not quite like that, Rita. I'm just doing what's right. Sure, but be careful with the mistress. Carmen told me she's furious since you got the new position. Josephine merely nodded, focusing on preparing the tray with Mrs. Cecilia's special breakfast, chamomile tea, toast with strawberry jam and chopped fruit. She had studied the ideal diet for Alzheimer's patients with Denise and had implemented small changes in the elderly woman's diet, with Mark's approval. Upon entering the room, she found Mrs. Cecilia already awake, sitting in bed with her gaze lost out the window. In recent days, Josephine had reorganized the environment, placing old photographs in the most visible spots and a vase of violets on the nightstand, flowers that, according to Silas, were the lady's favorites. Good morning, Mrs. Cecilia. I brought your coffee. Today we have that strawberry jam you liked yesterday, she said enthusiastically, placing the tray on the stand next to the bed. To her surprise, the elderly woman turned her face towards her and offered a small smile. Augustus? She murmured, confused. No, Mrs. Cecilia, it's me, Josephine, remember? The elderly woman's expression returned to its usual blankness, but that brief moment of connection filled Josephine with hope. With patience, she helped her eat, telling simple stories about her childhood in Virginia, where she had come to Los Angeles as a teenager. When they finished, Josephine was surprised by the abrupt entry of Felicity, accompanied by Dr. Richard Meadows, a middle-aged man with thin-rimmed glasses and a permanently bored expression. Good morning. Josephine, Dr. Richard needs to examine my mother-in-law. Can you excuse us? The tone was polite, but the order was clear. Of course, Mrs. Felicity, I'll just finish. Now please, Felicity interrupted, with a cold smile. Josephine hesitated, looking at Mrs. Cecilia, who clutched her hand with surprising strength. The doctor noticed the gesture. Interesting, he commented. She seems to have formed some bond with you. It's just a reflex, doctor, Felicity quickly replied. It happens all the time with anyone. Josephine delicately released the elderly woman's hand and left the room, but did not go far. She positioned herself in the corridor, close enough to hear the conversation through the half-open door. The dosage needs to be increased, Felicity, the doctor was saying. She's showing moments of lucidity that are not expected at this stage of the disease. Do whatever is necessary. The lawyer said we need the new report by the end of the month. And your husband? Won't he question the change in treatment? Mark is drowning in problems with that construction project in Washington, D.C. He barely has time to breathe, let alone check medical records. Besides, he trusts you completely. Josephine felt a chill run down her spine. Her instinct was right. Something wrong was happening in that house. The problem is this maid, Felicity continued. She's interfering with the routine we established. I've noticed changes in her diet. Reduction of nightly medication. If she's altering the prescription, that's very serious, the doctor sounded genuinely concerned. It could constitute medical negligence, and I won't take responsibility. Don't worry about her. I already have a plan to get rid of her. Josephine quickly moved away when she heard footsteps approaching the door. She pretended to be organizing towels in the corridor closet when Felicity and the doctor came out. You can go back to my mother-in-law now, Felicity instructed with false sweetness. Dr. Richard adjusted the medication. This new prescription must be followed strictly, understood? Any alteration must be communicated immediately. Yes, madam, Josephine replied, taking the paper extended to her. As soon as she was alone with Mrs. Cecilia, she photographed the new prescription and sent it to Denise with the message, urgent. I need to know what these medicines do. Over the next week, Josephine established a carefully planned routine. She created a detailed diary where she recorded all of Mrs. Cecilia's behaviors, the medications administered, and Dr. Richard's visits. She hid the notebook inside an empty laundry detergent box in the laundry room, where she knew no one would look. One rainy afternoon, while tidying Mrs. Cecilia's closet, she found a carved wooden box at the bottom of a drawer. Inside were yellowed letters, old photographs, and a worn leather-bound diary. Feeling like an intruder, but driven by the need to understand more about the elderly woman's life, Josephine began to read some pages. The notes, dating back almost 30 years, revealed a Mrs. Cecilia Albright, very different from the fragile figure she knew, a strong woman, a skilled administrator of the family business, while her husband expanded the construction company across the country. There were mentions of investments, properties, and most importantly, a specific plot of land on the Malibu coast. Augustus finalized the purchase of the Malibu area today. Finally, it will be Albright Construction's largest venture, our legacy for Mark. The resort project is magnificent with a private marina and everything else we planned. Our dream is coming true. Josephine carefully put everything back in its place, but not before photographing some pages that mentioned the Malibu project. Something told her that this information could be important. That night, after administering the medicines, discreetly replacing the sedative with vitamins she had brought from home, following Denise's advice, Josephine noticed that Mrs. Cecilia was more alert. "My dear," the elderly woman murmured, looking at Josephine with a rare clarity in her eyes. "I'm here." "Mrs. Cecilia," she replied, holding her hand. "Be careful. She wants—" The voice was weak, interspersed with long pauses, as if each word cost a monumental effort. "Who, Mrs. Cecilia? What does she want?" "The Malibu papers. My box." Before she could continue, Mrs. Cecilia closed her eyes, exhausted by the effort. Josephine stayed there, holding her hand, as the pieces began to fall into place in her mind. The next morning, Mark departed for a 3-day business trip to Washington, D.C. Little did he know that his absence would be the trigger for a series of events that would forever change the balance of power in that house. As soon as the car left the mansion, Felicity called a meeting with all the staff in the living room. Dressed in an impeccable tailored suit and discreet jewelry, she exuded authority. "I have an important announcement," she declared, looking directly at Josephine. "It has come to my attention that valuable objects have disappeared from the house in recent weeks. A diamond brooch from my personal collection and a gold chain that belonged to Mrs. Cecilia were not found after cleaning." A murmur of surprise ran through the group of employees. Josephine felt her blood run cold. "As you all know, I fully trust the team that has worked in this house for years." However, Felicity paused dramatically. "New people in positions of trust represent a risk we cannot ignore." "Excuse me." Mrs. Felicity Carmen, the housekeeper, interrupted, "but Josephine has worked here for 5 years. She can hardly be considered new." "True, Carmen, but her role recently changed, giving her unrestricted access to private areas and valuables. And coincidentally, that's when the disappearances began." All eyes turned to Josephine. who remained impassive despite the indignation she felt. "I didn't steal anything. Mrs. Felicity, I would never do that." "Of course you'd say that," Felicity responded with false understanding. "Unfortunately, we cannot simply rely on words. Therefore, I have requested a search of all employees' belongings. The security guard, Maurice, whom we recently hired, will conduct the procedure." A burly man whom Josephine had never seen before stepped forward. He had a grim expression and a private security company badge. "Please form a line and present your bags and backpacks," he ordered. One by one, the employees were searched. When it was Josephine's turn, she handed over her simple synthetic leather bag, confident that nothing would be found. To her horror, Maurice pulled a small diamond brooch and a golden chain from the bag. "What is that?" Josephine asked, genuinely shocked. "It seems we've found the culprit," Felicity declared with thinly veiled satisfaction. "Maurice, please escort Josephine to her room to collect her belongings. She is dismissed, and I will consider not pressing charges with the police, only out of consideration for her years of service and Mrs. Cecilia's delicate situation, which would be upset." "This is a setup," Josephine protested, looking around, seeking support from her colleagues. "I've never seen these jewels before. Someone put them in my bag." Carmen and Silas exchanged worried glances, but no one spoke up. "Enough drama, Josephine," Felicity cut in. "Accept the consequences of your actions with dignity. You have half an hour to leave the property." As she was escorted to her room by Maurice, Josephine thought frantically. She couldn't leave Mrs. Cecilia at the mercy of that woman and her accomplice doctor. She needed a plan, and fast. Passing by the elderly woman's room, she saw that she was sleeping deeply, probably sedated. On the nightstand, she noticed a half-empty glass of water. On impulse, she picked it up and hid it in the sleeve of her uniform. In her room, while Maurice waited impatiently at the door, Josephine carefully placed the glass in a plastic container she had in her bag. She collected her few belongings, but intentionally left behind her old cell phone, hidden under the mattress, configured to continuously record audio. The rain fell relentlessly over Los Angeles as Josephine left the Albright mansion. With a backpack containing her belongings and the precious plastic container hidden among her clothes, she walked to the bus stop. The humiliation of the false accusation still burned in her chest, but another emotion superseded it: determination. Instead of going to her apartment in Silver Lake, Josephine took the bus to General Hospital. Denise, her childhood friend who now worked as a nurse, had promised to help her. "My God, Josephine, you're soaked," Denise exclaimed, seeing her at the hospital reception, tall with afro braids framing an expressive face. Denise wore the traditional white uniform and had an access badge hanging around her neck. "I need your help." It's urgent," Josephine replied, trying to control the trembling in her hands, a mixture of cold and nervousness. In the staff break room, while Josephine dried her hair with a borrowed towel, she recounted everything: Mrs. Cecilia's mistreatment, the suspicious medications, the conversation between Felicity and the doctor, and finally, the setup that resulted in her dismissal. "This is very serious, Joe," Denise said, frowning. "We're talking about potential medical negligence, elder abuse, even an attempt to manipulate the mental state of a vulnerable patient. That's why I brought this." Josephine pulled the container with the glass from her bag. "I need to know what's inside. Mrs. Cecilia was too sedated this morning, much more than usual." Denise hesitated. "Analyzing this without authorization is complicated. I could lose my job." "Please, Dee, an elderly woman is in danger. If I'm wrong, I promise not to insist anymore." "But if I'm right?" After a few seconds of reflection, Denise nodded. "I have a friend in the lab who owes me some favors. I'll ask him to do a discreet analysis, without official records, but it will take a few days." "I don't have days, Denise. Mrs. Cecilia doesn't have days. Mark Albright returns from his trip the day after tomorrow, and it's my only chance to expose what's happening. I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, you need a place to stay and calmly think about the next step." Josephine spent the night in Denise's small apartment in Santa Monica, mentally reviewing every detail of the past few months at the mansion. Something in Mrs. Cecilia's mention of the Malibu project intrigued her. Using her friend's computer, she researched Albright Construction and its ventures on the Malibu coast. The results showed a gigantic project called Marina Exclusive Resort, advertised as the most luxurious tourist complex on the US coast, valued at billions of dollars. Construction had been halted for almost a year due to environmental licensing problems, causing serious losses to the construction company. "That's it," Josephine murmured to herself. "The land Mrs. Cecilia mentioned in her diary." The next morning, Denise arrived agitated, still wearing her night shift uniform. "I got it, Joe. My friend did the preliminary analysis, and you won't believe what he found." What was in the glass? A combination of medications that should never be administered together, especially to an Alzheimer's patient. There's a potent sedative, a high-dose antipsychotic, and traces of a substance that can accelerate cognitive decline. Josephine felt her blood boil. They're deliberately poisoning her. "This is very serious, Josephine. We need concrete evidence before making any accusations." "I have the cell phone recording in the room, if I can get back there." "It's too risky," Denise pondered. "But I have an idea. My cousin Thaddeus works as an IT technician for several houses in Oakwood Estates. He might be able to help." 3 hours later, Thaddeus, a slender young man in his 20s with facial piercings and a confident smile, met them at a downtown cafe. "So you want to retrieve a cell phone from inside the most monitored mansion in Oakwood Estates without getting caught? Piece of cake," he joked, but his eyes revealed he took the challenge seriously. "It's not just about retrieving it, Thaddeus. I need proof of what's happening inside, and I only have 1 day before the homeowner returns from his trip." Thaddeus scratched his chin, thoughtful. "I can hack the security system remotely to create a distraction. The cameras will be down for a few minutes. But you would need someone inside the house to help." Josephine immediately thought of Silas. The old security guard was loyal to the Albright family, especially to Mrs. Cecilia, who had helped him in the past. "I know just the person," she affirmed. While Thaddeus worked on his laptop, preparing the system intrusion, Josephine used Denise's phone to call Silas's personal cell. After 3 attempts, he finally answered, speaking in a low voice. "Josephine, you shouldn't be calling me. Everyone's watching who talks to you. Silas, I need your help. It's about Mrs. Cecilia." A heavy silence on the other end of the line, then a sigh. "I knew something was wrong. No one believed the theft story. You took care of her like no one else." "They're drugging her, Silas. I have proof, but I need to retrieve my cell phone that I left hidden in her room and see how she is." Another long pause. "What do I have to do?" Josephine explained the plan. Silas would hear on the radio when the cameras were deactivated. At that moment, he would distract the new security guard, Maurice, while Josephine would enter through the backside door, which he would leave unlocked. She would have a few minutes to get to the room, check on Mrs. Cecilia, and retrieve the cell phone. "It's risky," he said, "but for Mrs. Cecilia, I'll do it. She deserves someone fighting for her." At 8:15 p.m. that night, the plan was put into action. Thaddeus, from his apartment in Pasadena, hacked into the mansion's security system, causing a temporary glitch. Josephine, wearing dark clothes and a cap to hide her face, approached through the side garden, avoiding the streetlights. As agreed, the back door was unlocked. On the security monitor in the guardhouse, Silas watched the cameras fail. Immediately, he called Maurice on the radio. "We have a problem at the main gate. A suspicious car parked, and the driver seems to be photographing the house." While Maurice investigated the false threat, Josephine slipped into the mansion. She knew every inch of that place and moved with agility through the shadows until she reached the corridor leading to the bedrooms. As she approached Mrs. Cecilia's room, she heard voices. She stopped, hiding behind a decorative column. Felicity and Dr. Richard were talking in low tones at the bedroom door. "The report is ready," he was saying. "As we agreed, it indicates severe cognitive impairment and total incapacity. With this, you will have the health power of attorney and can make all necessary decisions." "Excellent. Mark returns tomorrow. I will present the document as an urgent medical recommendation. He will sign without much questioning, especially if we show that it is for his mother's well-being." "And what about the Malibu project? Did you get the signatures?" "Almost there. With the power of attorney, I will be able to sign as Mrs. Cecilia's legal representative, who still holds 40% of the land's shares. That will be enough to approve the sale. And your partner? Anxious. The offer of $2 billion for the area is irresistible, even having to share with my useless husband, not to mention our extra commission for facilitating the deal. Josephine felt her heart pound. The conspiracy was larger and more serious than she imagined. It wasn't just about mistreating Mrs. Cecilia, but an elaborate financial scheme. The doctor and Felicity moved away, heading towards the stairs. Josephine seized the moment to silently enter the elderly woman's room. Mrs. Cecilia was asleep, but her breathing seemed irregular, shallow. On the nightstand, several bottles of medication. Quickly, Josephine photographed the medicines with Denise's cell phone. Then, she located her own phone, still hidden under the mattress. The battery was almost dead, but the device continued recording. She transferred the files to Denise's cell phone via Bluetooth. Upon quickly checking the content, she found what she was looking for. Clear conversations between Felicity and Dr. Richard discussing the manipulation of medications and the plan to legally incapacitate Mrs. Cecilia. Even more disturbing, there was a conversation between Felicity and someone identified as Lawyer Paul about the falsification of documents related to the Malibu land. We need the old woman to appear incapable, but still lucid enough to sign the papers. It's a delicate balance, Felicity was saying in the recording. Leave that to me, the lawyer responded. I've already prepared everything. The health power of attorney is just the first step. Then comes the transfer of shares. If Richard does his part, everything will be completed in weeks. Josephine was about to leave when Mrs. Cecilia opened her eyes. Who's there? She murmured, her voice weak. It's me, Mrs. Cecilia, Josephine. The elderly woman blinked several times as if trying to focus. Josephine, you came back. Yes, madam. I came to see how you were. Medicines I don't want. I know, Mrs. Cecilia, I'll help you, I promise. Suddenly footsteps were heard in the corridor. Josephine quickly hid the cell phones and approached the window, preparing for a quick escape. The door opened and Carmen entered, freezing when she saw Josephine. What are you doing here? The housekeeper whispered, shocked. Carmen, please, don't report me. They're drugging Mrs. Cecilia. I have proof. The housekeeper looked at the elderly woman in bed, then at Josephine, undecided. I always knew something was wrong, she finally admitted. Dr. Richard never seemed trustworthy to me, and Mrs. Felicity, well, we all know what she's like. Help me, Carmen, for Mrs. Cecilia. After a tense moment, the housekeeper nodded. Go through the service passage. Silas is distracting Maurice, but not for long. Thank you. Tomorrow, when Mark returns, everything will come to light. Josephine gave Mrs. Cecilia a last look and quickly left. She went down the service stairs and through the laundry room, retrieving her diary hidden in the soap box. In the back garden, she crept through the bushes until she reached the side wall where Thaddeus was waiting for her with the car. Did you get it? He asked, accelerating as soon as she got in. I got much more than I expected, she replied, gripping the cell phones and the diary tightly. Tomorrow, when Mark Albright returns, Felicity's empire of lies will crumble. What Josephine didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Mark was landing in Los Angeles, having anticipated his return, and the first person to meet him at the airport would be Felicity herself, with a carefully crafted story about a disturbed cleaner who was obsessed with his family. A nervous energy filled Denise's apartment the next morning. Josephine hadn't been able to sleep, spending the night organizing the collected evidence, the preliminary result of the glass analysis, the cell phone recordings, photographs of the medications, pages from Mrs. Cecilia's diary, and her own detailed notes on the elderly woman's behavior in recent weeks. Are you sure you want to do this personally? Denise asked, pouring strong coffee into 2 mugs. We could send the evidence to him, or go directly to the police. Josephine shook her head, determined. Felicity must have already filled his head with lies about me. If I don't go personally, he might just dismiss everything as the ravings of a spiteful employee. And what if he doesn't believe you anyway? Then, they'll go to the press, to the authorities, to whoever is necessary. I won't leave Mrs. Cecilia in that woman's hands. The plan was simple but risky. Josephine would wait for Mark in his office in downtown Los Angeles financial district. Silas had informed her that the businessman always stopped there before going home when returning from a trip. With Thaddeus's help, who forged a delivery badge, she would gain access to the building. At 9:30 a.m., dressed in a delivery uniform and carrying a fake package, Josephine entered the imposing building that housed Albright Construction's headquarters. The lobby was all marble and glass with an immense company logo on the main wall. "Delivery for Mr. Mark Albright," she informed the receptionist, an efficient-looking young woman. "You can leave it with me, I'll sign for it," the assistant offered. "Sorry, but these are confidential documents. I need to deliver them personally and get his signature." The assistant hesitated. "He should arrive in about half an hour. You can wait there." She indicated an area with sofas. Josephine sat down, trying to control her nervousness. Every minute felt like an eternity. She watched executives entering and leaving meetings, hurried secretaries carrying folders, the frantic pace of a thriving business empire. At 10:15 a.m., the elevator opened and Mark Albright stepped out, accompanied by two men in suits. They were talking animatedly about financial projections. Josephine took a deep breath and stood up, firmly holding the fake package. At that moment, her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Silas. "Be careful. Felicity was in the office earlier. The assistant has already been warned about you." Too late. The assistant was looking at her with growing suspicion while speaking on the phone in a low voice. Josephine had no choice. It was now or never. She walked directly towards Mark, who had just said goodbye to the two executives. "Mr. Albright," she called, taking off her cap, "I need to speak with you urgently." Mark turned, surprised. It took him a few seconds to recognize her. "Josephine, what are you doing here? Felicity told me you were fired for." "For theft? That's a lie, sir. I was fired because I discovered what your wife is doing to your mother." The assistant was already beside them. "Mr. Albright, I've already called security. Your wife warned that this woman might appear. She's disturbed. She's been causing problems." Mark's face hardened. "It's better if we go to my office," he said, indicating a door at the end of the corridor. "Cancel the security call, Vera. I'll handle this." In the private office, Mark sat behind the imposing mahogany desk and indicated a chair for Josephine. His expression was a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "You have 2 minutes to explain why you trespassed into my office after being fired for theft." "Sir, I didn't steal anything. Felicity put those jewels in my bag because I was interfering with her plans." "What plans would those be?" he asked skeptically. "Your wife and Dr. Richard are deliberately drugging Mrs. Cecilia to incapacitate her. The goal is to obtain a health power of attorney and then manipulate the sale of the shares your mother owns in the Malibu land." Mark laughed, incredulous. "That's absurd. Felicity wouldn't need to do that. My mother is already incapacitated by her illness, and I would never sell the Malibu land. It's my father's dream project." "But that's exactly it, sir. They don't want you to know. The idea is to make everything seem like a necessary medical decision, so you sign the power of attorney without questioning. Then, with Mrs. Cecilia completely sedated, Felicity would sign the sale as her legal representative. Do you have any proof of these serious accusations, or just conspiracy theories?" Josephine opened her bag and took out a USB drive where Thaddeus had compiled all the evidence. "Here's everything. The result of the chemical analysis of Mrs. Cecilia's glass, showing medications that should never be administered together. Recordings of conversations between your wife and Dr. Richard discussing medication manipulation. Conversations with a lawyer named Paul about the falsification of documents for the sale of the land." Mark took the USB drive, still skeptical, and connected it to his computer. As he examined the files, Josephine continued, "Your mother is being deliberately kept in a state of confusion. On the days I managed to replace some of the medications with harmless vitamins, she showed significant improvement. She even mentioned the Malibu project, as if she knew it was in danger." Mark's face gradually changed as he listened to the recordings. Particularly impactful was a clear conversation between Felicity and the lawyer, discussing how the sale of the land would yield $2 billion, a significant portion of which would be diverted before even reaching the company's official accounts. "This can't be real," he murmured, running a hand through his graying hair. "Unfortunately, it is, sir. And there's more. I discovered in Mrs. Cecilia's belongings a diary where she mentions this land as the great legacy she and your father wanted to leave for you. It was not meant to be sold, but developed by Albright Construction itself. Mark stood up abruptly and walked to the window, looking at the city stretching out below. The silence lasted almost a full minute. "Why are you doing this, Josephine?" he finally asked, without turning around. "Why care so much about my mother to the point of risking everything?" The question caught her off guard. Josephine reflected for a moment. "Because she deserves dignity, sir. Because no one deserves to be used, manipulated, or discarded, no matter their condition. And because," she hesitated, "because my own grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I know how important it is to have someone who truly cares." Mark turned, facing her with a new expression, something between admiration and gratitude. "Let's go home now," he declared, picking up his jacket. "I want to see my mother immediately." The journey to Oakwood Estates was made in relative silence in Mark's luxurious Mercedes, driven by his private chauffeur. Josephine felt out of place in the leather-back seat, next to the businessman who alternated between tense calls and moments of deep contemplation. Upon arriving at the mansion, they were greeted by Felicity at the main entrance. She wore an elegant navy blue dress and smiled radiantly, but her smile froze when she saw Josephine getting out of the car behind her husband. "Mark, what a wonderful—" "Surprised I didn't expect you so soon," she said, completely ignoring the former employee's presence. "And I see you found our former maid. Should the police be called?" "It won't be necessary, Felicity," he replied coldly. "Josephine is here at my invitation." "But darling, after what she did, the jewels—" "Spare me the dramatics, Felicity. I want to see my mother now." Felicity's smile disappeared completely. Her eyes darted from Mark to Josephine, quickly assessing the situation. "Of course, darling. But Dr. Richard is with her now, performing an important procedure. Perhaps it's best to wait a bit." "What kind of procedure?" Josephine asked, alarmed. "Nothing that concerns you," Felicity retorted, her veneer of politeness completely dissolved. Mark was already heading up the stairs with firm steps. "Come on, Josephine. Felicity, immediately call that lawyer, Paul. I want him here in an hour." In Mrs. Cecilia's room, they found Dr. Richard injecting something into the IV drip connected to the sleeping elderly woman's arm. He almost dropped the syringe when he saw Mark and Josephine abruptly enter. "What? Is that you're administering, doctor?" Mark asked, approaching quickly. "Just the routine sedative, Mr. Albright. Your mother was agitated today." Josephine went straight to the IV stand and interrupted the flow, closing the valve. "This is absurd," the doctor protested. "You have no authority to interfere with medical treatment, and you have no authority to deliberately drug a patient to manipulate her mental state," Josephine countered. "Mr. Albright, can we request an immediate analysis of the contents of that syringe and the IV solution?" Mark nodded, his face red with suppressed anger. "Dr. Richard, consider yourself relieved of your duties in this house, and I suggest you contact your lawyer. The recordings I have of your conversations with my wife are more than sufficient for a lawsuit for medical negligence and attempted fraud." The doctor paled, looking at Felicity, who had just entered the room. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mark," she tried, adopting an expression of innocent confusion. "Dr. Richard is a respected professional who has cared for your mother according to the strictest protocols." "Enough, Felicity," Mark exploded. "I have all the evidence, the recordings, the medication analyses, the documents about the Malibu land. I know exactly what you and your accomplice were planning." Felicity changed tactics instantly. Her eyes filled with rehearsed tears, and she approached her husband with a pleading expression. "Mark, you don't understand. I did everything for our good, for the future of the company. The Malibu project is consuming all resources. It's a bottomless pit. The sale would be the best financial solution. At the cost of my mother's health? Manipulating her with drugs? Conspiring behind my back?" Mark's voice trembled with indignation. "It was all his idea," Felicity pointed at the doctor, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Richard convinced me it was best for everyone, including Mrs. Cecilia. He said the medications were part of the treatment." "That's a lie," the doctor protested, equally desperate. "You came to me with the plan already elaborated. Silence, Mark thundered. Both of you out of this house now. My lawyers will be in contact, and I suggest neither of you try to leave the country. While the argument unfolded, Josephine had approached Mrs. Cecilia, checking her vital signs. The elderly woman seemed deeply sedated, but she was breathing regularly. "She'll be fine, sir," she said softly to Mark, "but we need a real doctor to assess the situation and adjust the medication correctly." Mark nodded, suddenly seeming exhausted. He picked up the phone and made a quick call. "Dr. Paul Menzies, Mark Albright. I need you at my house immediately. It's a medical emergency." "Yes, my mother. Thank you." Then he turned to Felicity and the doctor, who remained paralyzed near the door. "You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings and leave my property. Silas, and Maurice will accompany you to ensure nothing but personal items are taken. Any attempt to contact my mother or me will be treated as trespassing. Are we clear?" Felicity shot Josephine a look of pure hatred before leaving the room, followed by the downcast doctor. In the corridor, the beginning of a heated argument between the two could be heard. Finally, alone with Mrs. Cecilia, Mark approached the bed and gently took his mother's hand in his. "I'm so sorry, Mother," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry I didn't realize sooner." Josephine remained at a respectful distance, observing that intimate moment of regret. After a few moments, Mark took a deep breath and composed himself. "Josephine, I would like you to immediately resume caring for my mother, with a substantial raise, obviously, and any conditions you deem necessary for your comfort." "It would be an honor, sir, but I think we'll need a specialized medical team to reverse the damage caused by the inappropriate medication. I'll arrange that today. And as for the rest," he paused, looking out the window, "there will be many changes around here, starting with a full investigation into that lawyer Paul and anyone else involved in this conspiracy. The Malibu project will continue as my parents dreamed." At that moment, Mrs. Cecilia stirred slightly in bed, her eyes opening with difficulty. Josephine immediately approached, gently adjusting the pillows. "I'm here, Mrs. Cecilia," she whispered, "and your son is too." The elderly woman blinked several times, her gaze wandering around the room until it finally fixed on Josephine. A small smile appeared on her dry lips. "You came back," she murmured with effort. "Yes, madam, and I'm not leaving again." Mark watched the scene with a mixture of emotions on his face. Something was being born there amidst the crisis. A new understanding, perhaps even a new beginning. The main battle had been won, but the war for Mrs. Cecilia's recovery and the rebuilding of trust was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at the Albright mansion. Spring had arrived in Los Angeles, bringing vibrant colors to the garden that Mrs. Cecilia now visited daily, always accompanied by Josephine or her son. The transformation in the house was evident to anyone who knew its recent history. The elderly woman's room had been completely renovated, with larger windows that allowed abundant natural light. The walls, previously in neutral tones, now displayed a soft yellow, a color chosen by Mrs. Cecilia herself in a rare moment of lucidity. Family photographs adorned the walls, visually telling the Albright story through the decades. "It's time for your exercise, Mrs. Cecilia," Josephine announced, entering the room with a breakfast tray filled with fresh fruit and natural yogurt. The elderly woman, sitting in her favorite armchair near the window, smiled upon recognizing the familiar voice. Her white hair was styled in a simple bun, and she wore a light-colored pant and blouse set, replacing the nightgowns that had once been her constant attire. "Good morning." "Josephine," she replied, her voice still weak, but much firmer than months ago. The specialized medical team hired by Mark had worked wonders. Under the supervision of Dr. Paul Menzies, a renowned neurologist and old family friend, Mrs. Cecilia had undergone a treatment protocol that included the gradual reduction of harmful medications, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and a diet specially formulated for Alzheimer's patients. The results, although limited by the progressive nature of the disease, surprised even the most optimistic. Mrs. Cecilia would not regain lost memory or cognitive ability, but her condition had stabilized and in some aspects showed small improvements. "The physical therapist Lucy will arrive in half an hour," Josephine commented as she helped the elderly woman eat. "She said today you'll be working longer in the garden." "Garden. Roses," Mrs. Cecilia murmured, an association that seemed to bring her joy. Josephine smiled. The garden roses had become an important point of connection for the elderly woman. When Mark discovered, through Josephine's notes, that his mother reacted positively to them, he had the entire garden replanted, transforming it into a spectacle of colors and aromas that stimulated Mrs. Cecilia's weakened senses. After breakfast and a session of simple stretches, Josephine helped the elderly woman prepare for physical therapy. While tidying the room, she reflected on the profound changes in her own life in recent months. From cleaner to primary caregiver, she now held a position of respect and trust in the house. Her salary had tripled, and Mark had insisted that she occupy one of the rooms in the main wing, no longer in the staff quarters. She had attended courses on Alzheimer's patient care, learned cognitive stimulation techniques, and had practically become an expert on the subject, often consulted even by the doctors who visited Mrs. Cecilia. Even more surprising was her new relationship with Mark Albright. What began as gratitude for saving his mother had gradually transformed into something deeper. Initially, they were just conversations during dinner, when he asked for details about Mrs. Cecilia's day. Then came the strolls through the garden, the three of them together, where Mark began to show genuine interest in Josephine's life, her origins in Virginia, her dreams and aspirations. "I've never met anyone with such integrity," he had said one evening, as they shared coffee on the veranda. "You risked everything for someone you barely knew, expecting nothing in return." Josephine had blushed, unaccustomed to compliments. "I just did what any decent person would do, sir." "Mark," he corrected with a smile, "after everything we've been through, I think we can drop the formalities." The transformation was not limited to Mrs. Cecilia's health and the nascent relationship between Josephine and Mark. The very structure of the house had changed. Carmen, the former housekeeper, had taken on a broader role in household management, working closely with Josephine. Silas had been promoted to head of security, responsible for a completely revamped team. Rita, the cook, now prepared special meals following nutritional guidelines for Mrs. Cecilia, in addition to the traditional dishes everyone enjoyed. As for Felicity and her accomplices, they faced the legal consequences of their actions. The process was ongoing in secrecy, but Josephine knew, through Mark's occasional comments, that the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Richard had his medical license suspended, and Lawyer Paul was cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealing a scheme that went beyond the Albright case. "It seems he was involved in at least 5 similar cases," Mark explained. "Wealthy elderly individuals with cognitive problems being manipulated to transfer assets or sign documents. An organized network of unscrupulous doctors, lawyers and family members." The arrival of physical therapist Lucy interrupted Josephine's reflections. An energetic young woman with indigenous features, Lucy had brought an innovative approach to Mrs. Cecilia's treatment, combining physical exercises with sensory stimulation. "Good morning, Mrs. Cecilia. Ready for our garden adventure?" she asked animatedly. "Garden?" "Yes," the elderly woman replied, her eyes sparkling in anticipation. Josephine watched the two leave for the terrace, Lucy patiently adjusting her steps to Mrs. Cecilia's slow pace. She took the opportunity to organize the afternoon medications and update the observation diary she meticulously kept, recording every small reaction, improvement, or difficulty. "How is she today?" Mark's voice sounded from the door, surprising her. "Well disposed. She recognized the roses when I mentioned the garden," Josephine replied, smiling. Mark entered the room, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit but without a tie, a concession to the new, more balanced lifestyle he was trying to adopt. He approached the window, watching his mother in the garden with Lucy. "I can hardly believe the transformation," he commented. 6 months ago, she barely opened her eyes. Her body was overloaded with inappropriate medications. Now, with the correct treatment, we've managed to stabilize her condition. The disease is still there, but she has quality of life." Mark turned to Josephine, his gaze reflecting deep emotion. "You know, I've been thinking a lot in recent weeks about what truly matters in life." "And have you come to any conclusions?" she asked, putting the diary in the drawer. "Several, actually. First, I spent decades chasing success and money, sacrificing relationships in the process. Second, ironically, it was someone who works for a monthly salary who taught me the true value of things. Josephine blushed again, a reaction she seemed unable to control near him. "Don't say that. You're a good man, Mark. You were just surrounded by the wrong people." "Don't absolve me so easily," he smiled, moving closer. "I was negligent with my mother, obsessive with work, blind to what was happening around me. But I'm trying to change. Proof of this change was everywhere. The Malibu project, previously stalled, had been completely reformulated. Instead of an exclusive resort for millionaires, Mark had transformed the concept into a sustainable development, which included environmental preservation areas and social projects for the local community. The charity dinner for the Cecilia Albright Foundation is confirmed for Saturday," he commented, changing the subject. "I'd like you to be by my side at the main table." The foundation, created by Mark in honor of his mother, funded Alzheimer's research and supported low-income families dealing with the disease. It was his way of transforming the painful experience into something positive. "I don't know if that would be appropriate, Mark. People will comment." "Let them comment," he replied firmly. "I'm tired of living according to other people's expectations. Besides, as executive director of the foundation, your presence is more than justified." Josephine was still surprised by the title. When Mark suggested she take over the foundation's direction, her first reaction was to refuse. "I'm just a caregiver. I don't have the training for this," she argued. But he insisted, highlighting her natural intelligence, empathy and quick learning ability. Now, 3 months later, she coordinated a team of professionals, raised funds, and outlined projects with a skill that surprised everyone, including herself. "By the way," Mark continued, "I received an interesting call today. Business Leaders of America magazine wants to do an article about the foundation and about us." "About us?" Josephine repeated, apprehensive. "What exactly do they want to know?" "The story of the caregiver who saved an elderly woman from her own family and ended up winning the heart of the businessman. They're calling it the romance that broke social barriers." Josephine couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. "That sounds like a primetime soap opera synopsis." "A good soap opera, I must say," Mark smiled, taking her hands in his, "with the difference that it's our reality." Their relationship had gradually become public. First, they were caught by the press during a dinner at a discreet restaurant. Then they appeared together at the inauguration of the new headquarters of the Cecilia Albright Foundation. The reactions were as expected. Astonishment, malicious speculation, insinuations of financial interest on her part. "Los Angeles society doesn't easily overcome its prejudices," Mark had commented at the time, with resignation. "But I won't let that dictate my happiness. Not anymore." The conversation was interrupted by the return of Mrs. Cecilia and Lucy from the garden. The elderly woman held a red rose in her hand, which she extended to Josephine upon entering. "For you." "Beautiful," she said with a luminous smile. "Thank you." "Mrs. Cecilia," Josephine replied, moved by the conscious gesture. Something rare in patients with advanced Alzheimer's. Lucy exchanged a meaningful look with Mark and Josephine. She chose the rose herself and insisted on bringing it. It was an incredible moment of clarity. After helping Mrs. Cecilia settle down for a brief rest, Josephine and Mark accompanied Lucy to the corridor. "The most recent exams show impressive stabilization," the physical therapist informed them. "Dr. Paul will discuss the details on his next visit, but he's optimistic. Obviously, Alzheimer's remains a degenerative condition, but her quality of life has significantly improved." "All thanks to Josephine's care," Mark affirmed, with clear pride in his voice. "It's a combination of factors," Lucy corrected diplomatically. "Appropriate medication, complementary therapies, stimulating environment. But yes, the emotional component is crucial. Mrs. Cecilia feels safe and loved, and that makes all the difference." After Lucy said goodbye, Mark and Josephine walked slowly down the corridor to the veranda, overlooking the garden. The scent of roses filled the air, mixing with the gentle afternoon breeze. "I have a surprise for you," he said, after a moment of comfortable silence. "Another one?" "You've been surprising me too much lately." "This one is special." Mark pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "I know it's relatively early, that many will say we're rushing things. But life has recently taught me that time is too precious to be wasted on empty social conventions." Josephine's heart raced. She watched, speechless, as he opened the box, revealing a ring with a single sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," Mark explained. "My mother always said it should be given to the woman who brought true transformation to our family. I can't think of anyone more deserving. Mark, people will say that you're with me for money, that I'm having some midlife crisis, that we've crossed unacceptable social barriers." He smiled. "Let them talk. The truth is, you taught me the meaning of courage, integrity, and genuine love. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that life is too short to live according to others' expectations." Silent tears streamed down Josephine's face. They were not tears of sadness or hesitation, but of deep emotion. She thought of her journey, from the outskirts of Los Angeles to the luxurious corridors of that mansion, from cleaner to foundation director, from invisible employee to partner of one of the country's most powerful men. "It's not a conventional story, is it?" she commented, wiping away her tears. "The best stories never are," he replied, sliding the ring onto her finger. "So, Josephine Silver, will you accept to build a new chapter with me?" "Yes," she simply replied, feeling that any elaboration would be superfluous. At that moment they heard a sound coming from Mrs. Cecilia's room. She was quietly humming an old carnival march. They exchanged glances of surprise and joy before entering together to share the news with her. In the room, illuminated by the afternoon sun, they found the elderly woman awake, looking out the window with a serene expression. Seeing them, she smiled. Her eyes, once constantly vacant, seemed momentarily lucid. "Mother," Mark said, sitting beside her, "Josephine and I have some news to share." Mrs. Cecilia looked at the ring on Josephine's finger and, in a rare moment of clarity, took both their hands in hers. "Family," she simply said, a word laden with meaning. "Yes." "Mom," Mark confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "Family." Josephine watched the scene with a heart overflowing. In a world where power and money often stifle deeper values, she had found her place, not just as a caregiver or companion, but as someone who had the courage to confront injustice and the compassion to defend the vulnerable. The Albright mansion, once a stage for conspiracies and coldness, was now transforming into a true home. And as the sun set on the Los Angeles horizon, Josephine knew that her journey, far from over, was just beginning a new and luminous chapter. End of story, dear listeners. We hope that the story of Josephine and Mrs. Cecilia has touched your hearts. A simple employee who, with her courage and compassion, transformed not only the life of a vulnerable elderly woman, but also that of everyone around her, including a powerful businessman who rediscovered the true meaning of family and love. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other incredible stories that address themes such as overcoming challenges, courage, and transformation. Find it by clicking here on the side. If this narrative about an improbable heroine who confronted an entire system to protect those who couldn't defend themselves touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the silent victories of those whom many consider invisible. Share in the comments if you have ever witnessed or been the protagonist of a situation where the courage of an ordinary person changed the course of things. Your stories inspire us to continue. Until next time.